All right, everybody, I think we're ready to get started. So hi, everybody. I'm Trevor Hall. I'm an engineering manager here at Tableau. Work with some fantastic engineers on a lot of great problems, including trying to solve our forward and backward workbook compatibility problems. So if you have any frustrations or concerns about that, find us in the Tableau lab. We'll be there all day tomorrow, and I'd love to hear from you. So enough about me. We're all here because the great products and great companies survive on survey data. And so it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is the master of helping people see and understand their survey data. He is a Tableau Zen master, an Iron Viz champion, the author of the Tableau white paper on how to visualize survey data, the co-author on the big book of dashboards, and if you haven't already, I'd encourage you to go to Amazon and place a pre-order for your copy now. You're welcome. And the leader and bassist for the New York City-based band The Top Shelves. I know I'm forgetting something else, but anyways, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Steve Wexler, everybody.
How are you all doing? Wow, this is a surprising turnout for something that I consider to be a real niche subject matter. Not just visualizing data, which at a cocktail party may not be the greatest conversation starter. No, visualizing survey data. And I'm going to take a quick survey. What tool do people use for creating their surveys? You can just shout it out. Qualtrics, very popular tool, great company. What else? Okay, maybe the Survey Monkey. What else? Which one? Typeform? I don't know that one. We must talk. Also, just out of curiosity, who thinks they have, really ask a lot of questions in their survey, that they have ever had, really a massive number of questions. What do you consider a lot of columns? I'm just curious. Go ahead, you raised your hand over here. How many columns were in it? Just give me a number. Is it more than 1,000 columns? No. Okay. Who has more than 1,000? Anyone? What do you have back there? Go ahead. Couldn't quite hear what you said, but the most I've ever seen is 13,000. And it's usually like a net promoter score thing where you're asking multiple questions about multiple brands. Last thing, and then we'll get moving on. You know what these things in the front they're called? They're called confidence monitors. They said, okay, you're going to be playing this big room and it has a confidence monitor in it. And I'm wondering, well, what's a confidence monitor? Does it flash inspirational messages? It's like, you're doing great. Hey, have you been working out? No, it just allows me to look at the slide without looking over my shoulder to see what's there. So it's just that's what a confidence monitor is. So there will be very little PowerPoint, maybe about 15% of the presentation is PowerPoint, and the rest is, I'm looking over my shoulder. Don't do that, it's right here. The rest is going to be a live demo. How many of you have experience, have been doing this for a while, visualizing survey data with Tableau? Great. How many of you are brand new to this? All right, this is the session, this is Visualizing Survey Data 2.0. It's like what new things have kind of come across my plate or my path in the last year. So some of it will be advanced. I will do some level setting at the beginning, and a big part of that is getting your data just so. The other thing we're going to be dealing with is a double pivot. You've probably, if you've done this at all, you've probably realized I have to reshape my data. And what tool are you going to use? I'm going to show you two different facets to reshape and what that gives you. A huge part of what I do, and probably what you do as well, is measuring sentiment or proclivities, Likert scale data. And it really is pronounced Likert, not Likert, even though it's L-I-K-E-R-T. The man's name was Rensis Likert. Another piece of that is very often you'll say, on a scale of 1 to 10, or 1 to 5, indicate how important these 10 features are. It could be, or the 10 things, how important are these aspects of your hotel room? How modern it is, fast internet connection, cleanliness, how roomy it is, whether there's a big screen TV. So then there's often another follow-up question, which is, how satisfied are you with that? And I haven't done a whole lot with showing importance versus satisfaction, but this entire presentation came about from people emailing saying, hey, how do you do such and such, or I'm kind of stuck on this, or I'm trying to do such and such. So that's the catalyst for this is people contacting me and saying, are there cool ways to do this? And I'm going to show you some ways, and we'll see if they kind of work for you. Anyone who has seen me present before know that for me, getting people to use dashboards is somehow I can insert the person who is using the dashboard into the dashboard. Make it personal, make it something that is somehow meaningful to that person. So if they can somehow see what themselves in the data that you're presenting, they'll really gravitate to what you're doing, and I'll show you an example of that. Finally, another thing that I've been asked to do is, well, what happens if the survey doesn't have enough responses? Meaning that, gee, we don't want to mislead people to think that they should come to a conclusion, or the data suddenly isn't anonymized. Let's say you have salary data, and you allow people to really winnow things down, and you realize, oh, based on all the filter settings, I know who we're talking about there. But you want the stuff to be anonymized. Finally, we'll want to just open up, if there's stuff in addition to this that you want to see, that will be maybe a session 2 years from now. I did a session 2 years ago. The video is up there. It's got a lot of the basics in it. Maybe we'll do Survey 3.0. So why are we doing all this stuff? Oh, before I tell you why we're doing all this stuff, you do not need to take careful notes on how you do all this stuff. Here's some cool things, but afterwards, if you want to know where everything is, the sample workbooks, blogs about this, just go to datarevelations.com and click the Visualizing Survey Data. Pretty much everything I've written about, all these blog posts over the last 5 years are available there. And as will this presentation, as will the examples, as will new blog posts. Give me until the end of next week to get everything up there, but you do not have to be taking down, how did I do that? Finally, or not finally, but why are we doing all this? So we can make cool stuff. And that is, in fact, this is a visualization of last year's speaker presentations. Every dot is a different speaker presenter, and you have the ability to type in the speaker and see, well, what was their performance like. So at the end of this session, with your help, you can make me a big dot that's way at the top, okay? But that's what I'm talking about with personalization. You do something like this, everyone wants to know, well, how did I do? Was I in the top quartile? Was I in the median? Did I do poorly? Did lots of people review the session or not? Versus, gee, here was what the average score was. People go nuts for this type of stuff. By the way, I don't know who Speaker 305 was, but he or she was absolutely magnificent. Jeff Schaefer knows who Speaker 305 was. He kind of figured out how to get all the IDs and associate it with the names, and he tweeted that last year. So be very careful about Jeff. All right, so let me do some level setting on this thing. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with stuff. And before I do any visualization of stuff, I want to see the survey instrument. I'd love to see what it looked like when it was presented to people. I want to see a copy of it in a Word document or whatever, and then I want to see what the raw data looks like. So this is maybe how it was presented. This is from 5 years ago, this particular thing. So there's something just remarkably prescient about presenting it here. Do you plan to vote in the upcoming election? Yes, no, don't know. Well, here is what it will look like when you download the data or in your database. And it's usually, most survey tools will allow you to get the data in two formats. You'll either have 0, 1s, and 2s, either in numeric format or in text format. You want to have it in both. It'll make your life much easier to do that. And then when you finally have the data and it's set up well, you might create a visualization that looks like this. Okay, a check all that apply question or a multi-punch question is please indicate all the things you measure, or of these 15, indicate which are the 5 that are most important to you. And here's how it might be rendered in text format. Here's how it might be rendered in numeric format. Qualtrics doesn't do it as zeros and ones. It does it at ones and blanks, which can present a problem. There are ways to work around that. Again, you go to Data Revelations, there's a blog post about what do you do with tools that don't code things so that it knows the difference between someone didn't answer this particular thing or someone skipped the question completely. So I'm not going to cover that now. That's up on the blog post. And here's a way that you might visualize it. And here we're making the thing stand out by color, saying, hey, there was a big difference in this between what men said and what women said. Likert scale questions indicate the degree to which you agree or disagree with the following statements, or how important is this thing, or how often do you use something, which is you're kind of applying a quantitative scale to a qualitative notion. Here's how it might be rendered in your survey tool. And then here is a way to do it, which is a divergent stack bar chart, which is you're kind of showing how things are skewing positive or negative. This is most likely how the data gets delivered to you, either a CSV file, maybe you're connecting to it directly, but the idea that every single thing that was asked is a separate column, and every row is all the responses from a single individual. That is not going to cut it if you're trying to work with Tableau and most tools. You'll just be miserable. What you want to end up doing is reshaping the data so that you have a separate response for each question that the person answered, although I'm leaving certain things like the way I want to cut the data, in this case by gender, by location, by generation, and I also have a weighting variable there. I will leave that, but I will pivot or reshape everything else. This is where you ideally want to be. You want to have your demographic data. You want to have a question ID. You want to have all the numeric responses, the responses as rendered from your survey tool as numbers, the text responses, and very importantly, something that tells you what each of the questions are. You know, that looks up that, that question ID 134_2 is this. So you don't have to be right-clicking and saying, making aliases and stuff like that. And in fact, if you want to compare satisfaction and importance, you'll be miserable if you don't have this additional metadata. But wait. Why leave the demographics there, you know, as a separate gender, location, age, education, political leanings, religious bent, whatever it is? How many of you have to cut the data by a lot of different things? You know, like, and how many of you are creating like compound variables? Meaning things like left-handed liberals from Los Angeles, you know, that you've really got things, you know, really down. So one of my clients is Marist Poll, and this whole thing came out of a requirement, what I'm about to show you, and it opens up, it's cool stuff. I've only shown it to about 15 people. They had 20 or 30 ways that they were cutting the data, and they needed to show every possible way in one dashboard, in one report. And I was bummed, because I'm used to doing, okay, you know, here's this question, and I can show it broken down by gender. And then I can give them a little widget that says, well, now I'd like to see it broken down by location. And then now I'd like to see it broken down by generation, by education. The idea of, wait, you mean I have to make something, I'm going to have to make this visualization 20 times and then put it on a dashboard? And I'm become really lazy. And I said, there's no way I'm doing that. So looked into, well, why don't we pivot the demographics as well and see what happens when we do that? So what are we going to do to pivot the demographics? What are the tools that are in our arsenal? And I'm not including something like the way cool Qualtrics web connector, as that's specific to Qualtrics. But can we use Tableau's built-in pivot feature? What about Alteryx Designer? What about the Tableau add-in for Excel? Or the best solution, which is to get a friend to do it for you by far. Okay, let's assume we can't get a friend to do it for you. And the built-in pivot feature will not work because we need to do joins on two pivoted tables. So we could throw that out. So we're either going to use Alteryx Designer, which is my tool of choice for this, or you can use the Tableau add-in for Excel, which is free. The only downside is every time your data refreshes, you have to go through this process, and it only works on Windows. But it does work, and it's great. This is what the workflow looks like in Alteryx. How many of you are familiar with Alteryx? Wow, that's great. It just marries so well for survey data. And this is what the joins will look like in if you're using the built-in Excel add-in. So, and I'm going to show you briefly how to do this in Excel. I'm not going to do this in Alteryx, but the workflow will be up on my website certainly by the end of this month. And we are ready to switch over now from PowerPoint, and let's do a live demo. And there we go. So let's look at this data for a second. So this is the survey data that I was talking about before, and this is the raw data as it came in as data labels. Here's the raw data as data numbers, and if you were using the reshaping tool, you would keep the demographics that you want to cut the data by over here, go to the Tableau add-in, and reshape the data. What I want to look at is I've just copied the demographics over for the moment. And what would happen if I'd reshape these? So I can I've got my response ID, which is crucial that I have a unique response ID. And I'll reshape the data here. And so I'm now repeating the respondent ID for every different demographic I have. So I can call this demographic. I can call this the dem label. Well, I'm not going to go through the process of doing all the pivoting. Let me just show you what you need to have in place. Here's the data rendered as labels reshaped. Here's the same data as numbers reshaped. Here it is, I've combined it. So you notice response ID 2, man, South America. Let's see, what is this generation? Generation X. And the weighting So I'm listing this as many times as I need as all the questions I have. I've got the question ID, I've got the response to each of these individual questions as text and as values. Here also is the demographics reshaped. I don't usually do that, but we're going to see the advantages of it in a minute. And this is what I just did now with all of you. So let me, very quickly, let me see what happens if I reshape the demographics and have in this case, I've only got 3 different ways I'm cutting the data, but indicated that we have a bunch of people with a lot of different ways of cutting it. So let me go into Tableau. And let's connect to this data and see the advantages of working this way and why we're going to be able to, in one screen, just see every way of cutting the data for every single question. So I'm going to connect to Excel. Let me go to this reshaped data. So I used the Excel add-in to reshape the numbers, reset the text. I've got a helper file. Really want to accentuate that. This probably doesn't come directly from your survey tool. You may have to build it by hand, but it's just something that maps each question ID to a human readable form and then groups related questions together. Biggest, most helpful thing that I've done in the last 3-4 years was doing this, which is getting the data just so and having this metadata, data about the data. Tremendous help with this. So let me bring in the data, the combined data. Let me bring in the question helper, which tells me what each of the questions are. And let me bring in the reshaped demographics. So here, the demographics reshaped, it's doing it based on the respondent's ID. And this is just a question ID lookup. I'll create an extract, Oh, the silence of the extract creating. Imagine if we had the hyper engine right now, it would all be done. Can't wait to show this next year with that. All right, I'm a group by folder kind of guy rather than group by data source. And first thing is, I started with 845 rows in the original data. When I did the first pivot, I had 25,000. The additional pivot, I've gone from 845 rows to 75,000. Don't let that freak you out. You know, I can get that really quickly. I can go number of records and go, oh my gosh, it's at 74,946. So in the past, the way I would build my, hey, who took my survey? I always start that way. Before I start analyzing what people answered, I want to know who are they? And in the past, I'd do something like I'd put gender up here, and I would right drag respondent ID, and I would say, count the distinct number of respondents that are here. And I would build my gender visualization. Then I would duplicate the sheet, replace gender with generation, et cetera, et cetera. And it worked fine. Well, let me change this a little bit. Now that I've done this double pivot, I'll put the demographic here. I'll put the demographic label. So I've got gender, generation, location, and then I'll just do that, count the distinct number of responses. I can't just drag number of records up there because I've got each respondent for every question they answered. I have to say, in this one case, count the distinct number of respondents. Oops. Right drag, measure, make this count distinct. Done. And I could do the percentage of the total and things like that. And now I've got my full demographic breakdown, however it was established, instead of having to create these separate sheets and create a dashboard. And let me show you how lovely this looks. So instead of creating 3 separate or 15 separate sheets and tying them together, I've just got one, and I've got the breakdown of it, and it works great. So this is my master demographics on this thing. But it works really well for looking at various visualizations that we might want to do. So we've now got who took the survey. Let's say I want to know, hey, I want to look at the satisfaction questions, or I want to look at the check all that apply questions. And I want to know what were the percentage of people that said they do this? What are the percentage of people that say they do that? So, all right, nothing has changed. I'll create a calculated field, which is check all apply percent. Sorry, I can't let that go. And remember that you either had zeros or you had ones in the thing. So you add up the values, and you divide by the number of people that responded. So let me do this, which is let me say, well, which question do I want to analyze? Well, I want to look at the what do you measure questions. And having the wording, I don't then have to say, oh, Q134_2 means metabolism. I've already got it mapped. And then I can put the demographic and the demographic label. And then this is a percentage. Let me do default properties, number format percentage. Zero decimal places. And I've got my results. Well, do we really want to know what people who choose to live in Antarctica think? Probably not. This is a mess, but I'm now able to look at, for every single check all that apply question, a breakdown by every single demographic and see, is there anything interesting that pops out? And there are a few things like, whoa, look at this. Asia for adrenaline production is way higher than anything else. This is kind of a mess. This is not the way I would present it, but it's very useful to see every possible, every way of cutting the data in one place. The way I would choose to do this would be something like this, which is show the overall and then show the breakdown by each of the demographics. So I'm going, okay, overall, 76% of respondents measure adrenaline production. Well, whoa, you're probably seeing the Asia at 93% popping out. And I didn't have to go spelunking for it. It was like, here's everything, every possible demographic. If it turns out you're only interested in location, I'll just filter it by that. Look at metabolism. Oh, are we going to take this seriously or not? Only 15 traditionalists. That is another name for the generation that came before the baby boomers. They're known as the greatest generation, the silent generation, and also traditionalists. So if you want a quick way to be able to see what is responses to a survey broken down by every possibility, do the double pivot. It works great. You can still do the single pivot as well. Only thing to watch out for, and I will blog about this, is that, let's say I put number of records up here. Hold on. And let me right-click on this and make it discrete. I know 1,050 people did not answer each of these questions. Only 845 took the survey. It's because it's listing each person 3 times. So if you're dealing with weighted data and things like that, I've got to, for the overall look of this thing, filter it by one of the demographics. It's the only gotcha in this whole double pivot approach. All right, there'll be plenty of stuff up on the blog about the double pivot. Let's get to the next item, which is showing sentiment. And this was a redo. Sorry, I did this before I knew we were going to be doing this today. But this was a makeover of a New York Times graphic from like March of last year, where they were trying to show the propensity of certain candidates to tell the truth or lie. The biggest problem that anyone I've shown this to says they just can't believe that Bill Clinton is the most truthful politician that's there. But if you looked at the New York Times graphic, it was a 100% stack bar chart. And they just, 100% stack bar charts just blow if you have more than 2 or 3 segments in there. You just can't do the comparison. So as a lot of my colleagues know and readers of the blog know, I'm a big fan of what is called the divergent stack bar chart, where you actually move the bar left and right to show sentiment. Well, in working on the big book of dashboards with Andy Cotgreave and Jeffrey Schaefer, he did a dashboard about sentiment. And I went, no, you don't do sentiment. That's my, survey data. And it was really cool. And it was different, had some different ways of looking at it. So I decided it might be useful to show you all these different ways of showing sentiment. And then I'll combine them together and you can decide, well, what's going to be the best way to show it. So this is one that I've kind of glommed onto and that I'm fond of, which is don't just show a score, but also show how the score was made up. That is the average Likert score based on a scale of going from 0 to 4. For whatever reason, they did the data, instead of going from 1 through 5, they did 0 through 4. There are 2 reasons not to go with 0 through, start at 0. Can anyone, and if you're confident and know what they are, go ahead and tell me what it is. Where might you have a gotcha with starting at 0? Start when you skip the answer? But in this case, if you skip the answer, it's going to be a blank. But good point. Anyone know? Go ahead. Why not? What's wrong with the 0, 1, 2, or 3, or 4? You said calculating the average with missing values. If you're dealing with weighted data, you need to multiply the response times whatever their weighting is, and you're going to get this 0 no matter what if you do it. So if you got data from 0 through 4 and you're dealing with weighted data, just create a new field called value plus 1, so that you just bumped everything up to go through 1 through 5. The other reason is that people just like a 1 through 5 scale. Okay, quick question, then I got to move. And well, NPS starts at 0 and it goes from 0 through 10. Hold the thought on NPS, but you're probably, the way you compute Net Promoter Score, try to avoid saying NPS score, because the S is score, okay? So do your best not to do that. But a Net Promoter Score, how many of you are familiar with that? How many of you are going, what on earth is he talking about, Net Promoter Score? Net Promoter Score is this, you ask people on a scale of 0 through 10, and it has to do with sentiment, so it's applicable. So I don't mind going off for 1 second. It is computed by the percentage of people that are considered promoters minus the percentage of people that are detractors multiplied by 100. You get a number between 0 and 100. A detractor is anyone who gave something a 0 through 6. A promoter is anyone who gave something a 9 or a 10. And a neutral is someone who gave something a 7 or 8. So I was at a restaurant with my wife. They had a little card there, and they had the ultimate Net Promoter Score thing, which is, based on your experience this evening, would you recommend this restaurant to a friend or colleague? And my wife said, yeah, it was really good. I'd give it an 8. No, 9. No, an 8's a really good score. No, they're doing Net Promoter Score. You got to do this. You got to, if you really like it, you got to give it a 9. And she just said, you mean an 8 is considered passive or neutral? Yeah, in the world of Net Promoter Score type of thing. I don't think you're going to run into the problem with multiplying the weighted stuff, because you're computing the stuff differently, but it's a good observation. In any case, item 1 of showing this stuff. Here it is as maybe you don't need to show 3 points of stuff. And the cool part about this is you can see, oh man, there are a lot of people that are sitting on the fence. These are the neutrals. These are the people that said, I don't know. By the way, your life would be much easier if you could just convince people, can we just do even scale Likert questions? 4-point or 6-point, not go with the 5, 7, or 3-point. Here is just positive or negative with this lovely little background kind of orange and blue, which is there, which I stole from Jeff. By the way, any first-time authors out there, have your co-authors do the hard work and then you take credit for it. That's here's another way, which is a histogram approach, which is showing here are the different things, and I see, well, whatever the first item is really skewing positive, whatever the last item is skewing negative, and you can see where there are lots of neutrals. The percent top 2 box or percent top 2 boxes, which is the percentage of people that chose either strongly agree or agree. And then this super jitter, which is something that Jeff had done on one of his dashboards, it doesn't work well here because it's just like, wow, there are just so many dots. Where it works quite well is where you may see, hey, not a lot of people answered this thing. And you can see that because there are fewer dots. And finally, here's just a dashboard that says, it's the same thing, and here are the different ways of expressing it. Sorry, keep that out of the way. And whatever is the way that is going to be most effective for your audience to be able to move on stuff. So the super jitter I don't think works here because it's hard for me to sort the things or see how things work. I like the histogram. I love the positive and negative and showing the sentiment. And then also the idea of the score. What's interesting is I am sorting by the average score, but the percent top 2 boxes would sort differently. So that's kind of everything I know about sentiment, except one more way of looking at something. And I want to show you some work that I had done for Marist Poll and PBS. And it's always cool when you see your stuff on TV. Showing sentiment, but we're just looking at positive and negative. And looking at the future when your children, so here's the question. Looking at the future when your children grow up, do you think they will be better off or worse off than you are now? hey, same type of thing, which is we'd like to see this by every possible demographic that we care about. And there's something, instead of just having sort of economist or clinical bars, there's something which is kind of warmer about having this barbell chart, or it's a lollipop chart that goes in both directions. And I think Andy Cotgreave first coined the term a lollipop chart. But the only gotcha with this, and it's an important one, by the way, I'm dying to see, this is a case where I would love to see animated transitions, that I'd like to see both barbells start in the center and move out, because it would accentuate where there were really big differences, because one of the bars would be going longer, and like that millennials at 69%, or the non-whites at 77%. It would draw attention to where that difference is. So in any case, let me show you this other way of showing sentiment, and I will apply it to the same thing that we looked at before, and I will tell you where the major gotcha is. So I have a calculated field that says, what are the percentage of people that said yes, better, what are the percentage of people that said worse? I put a minus sign in front of the ones that said worse, so it goes in the opposite direction. A lollipop chart or a barbell chart is just the same thing done, the exact same chart done twice. It's a bar chart with a very thin bar, and then it is duplicate that exact field, but instead, the second time around, instead of making a bar chart, make it a circle chart. And just make sure and make it a dual axes chart and synchronize the axes. The gotcha on it is this. If I didn't do something special in here, this 41% negative would have gone out here, because it would stretch the axes so that it goes to whatever is the largest value. So it would look like North America was split 50-50, but it wasn't. So you either need to fix the axes, or you put a hidden reference line in here. So I have a hidden reference line at minus 70% and a hidden reference line at 70%, and it makes sure that the axes on the negative stuff won't go too far to the left or too far to the right, as the case would be with this. So that's one of the little surprises, and I promise when I write the blog post with this, we'll have that. Let's see how we are doing for time. Not great, because I kind of love this stuff and love talking about it. Let's get into, I think the next item is importance and satisfaction. So let me show you where that lives, where the problem is with it, why you want to have that metadata, and then different ways of showing stuff very quickly. Let me go to the book that we were creating from scratch. So in this case, I might want to look at, so I'll use my question grouping, and I just want to look at the importance questions and the satisfaction questions. And I'll have my wording up here, and then I will have my question grouping here. So this is where, if you don't have that metadata and you try to right click and say, oh, Q134_S is for 24/7 support, and then you try to do it again, it'll say you can't alias the same thing twice. How many of you have run into that at all? How many of you have run into the, oh, well, maybe I can get away with just typing a space on the second alias? You can't in this case, because they need to be exactly the same item that's here. So how are we going to show this? And this is kind of Tableau. How do you show comparison of this year versus last year? Is it a bar and bar chart, et cetera, et cetera? So nothing survey specific. This is just different ways of dealing with, this is like progress against a goal. In this case, this is how important something is, and this is the percentage of people that are satisfied with it. Someone came up with the idea of, wait a second, you want people to be as satisfied, you don't want to be over-serving customers or under-serving them. What do I mean by over-serving them? You're putting huge amount of time into resources that people don't care about. Think about it for a sec. Oh my gosh, let's make sure that people just love the crown molding in these hotel rooms. Okay, we're going to put all our effort into the crown molding. And then you do a survey, and people say, we love the crown molding. But you ask them how important it is when making a buying decision. They say it's not important at all. So you of course want to exceed people's expectations. You want them to be overly satisfied, but you don't want to be putting time and resources. So what we've got is the percentage of people who chose either very important or important, and then the percentage of people who are satisfied or extremely satisfied. And you want each of the items to be on the 45-degree line. And if you want to know how do you make a 45-degree line in Tableau, you type Tableau 45-degree line, and you'll get, there are a number of solutions to it, and by far the best one comes from Ben Jones. I won't go into the details of it. So this is a problem, ability to customize the UI. This is pretty, 60% of people said that it's 61% very important or important, yet only 12% are very satisfied or satisfied with it. So this is not so, here's one case where we're exceeding expectations. You want to be as close to the line as possible. By the way, I'm not saying this is how you should do it. I'm saying this is a way to do it that might resonate. Here it is, instead of using percent top 2 boxes, it is using average Likert score. And we can say, oh, in these places we're actually exceeding if you do it that way. For me, my preference is I like this one. I am sorting this by the gray dot is how important is something, the blue dot is your ability to satisfy people. So I can see ability to customize the UI is the 5th most important thing, but I am nowhere near where I need to be with it. So this one speaks to me, but it may be that the 45-degree one speaks to your, the scatter plot may speak to your audience better. So I don't have a, hey, here's the best way, here's the worst way to do this. I'm going to go for about another 8 minutes, so I do want to show, for me, what is a really important thing, which is personalization. Yeah? You want to be as close together as possible. Because well, do I, you can. I may even have that. So the question is coming from one of my favorite gadflies, Andy Kriebel, which is, what's most important? Is it should I be sorting this based on the gap, or should I be sorting it based on what's most important? The chart looks cooler when you do it based on what's most important, based on sorting it by the gap, but we could certainly do it by the gap. In fact, if everyone wants to come around the screen after the session, we'll just do that in real time. It's certainly one of the calculated fields there. I think my answer is, yeah, if that's what's most important, do it by the gap, in which case this would be first. Chart doesn't look as cool. And that's why we're here, to make things that look cool. So here is the concept of data that suddenly was just insanely boring becoming interesting. Well, how do you make data that's insanely boring become interesting? It isn't by making donut charts and packed bubbles and word clouds and stuff like that. You want to make it really interesting, make it about the person who's looking at the data. One of my favorite example, and I was really inspired by this, I'm going to show you a web-based example. I saw Chad Skelton at the Tapestry conference a few years ago do something which is, are you over the hill in the United States? And the data by itself is just a histogram showing, okay, here's the number, how many people are this age, et cetera. If you're a data geek, you probably go, whoa, what happened here? Is it the baby boom, or is it that when people retire, they die? It's why the sudden drop? But where people go nuts is they want to type in their age and see, oh, how much older am I? This is really depressing if you're over 50. I'm just going to warn you right now that you have no idea just how much older you are than the rest of the United States. I'm not going to play with it right now. but it is fun, and and you get a sense of it. You end up putting your kids' data in. Andy Kriebel did something similar with when were you born, and the popularity of certain birth dates, et cetera. The similar thing that I did with Deloitte, Human Capital Trends and Benchmarking Dashboard. This data, if you're way into that stuff, okay, it's interesting. But if you can say, hey, can I put in my own values and then see where I am with other organizations, with peer organizations, man, the stuff just kicks. So here's, in fact, an input where you could use parameters to put in your scores and stuff. And then you can see what your scores are, versus peer organizations and where you're above and where you're below. That's where the excitement for something like this came in. So these are, in fact, the speaker rating sessions from last year. Every dot, and that is a session. You can hover over the dot if you wish. And what the rank is, their percentile, and there's also the number of responses that are there. And you want to know, well, how am I doing versus, did I do a good job? Did I do as good a job, et cetera? So I'm going to do the pitch again. With your help, you can make me a dot that is near the top of this list. But if I were to just show, well, here's the average scores, and then just give you something with, well, here was your score, it just won't have the meaning. If you're able to, ferret in this thing, and I am not speaker 317, by the way, but and type this in and say, whoa, I did pretty well. The only thing that's kind of off on this is that some sessions had 150 people taking the survey, and some sessions had 3 people taking the survey. So I can size the dots by the number of respondents, but it kind of looks like champagne bubbles. I think I'm going to do a visualization of the ratings of champagne, of different sparkling wines throughout the world and put them in champagne glasses. But this is at least telling you that, all right, this person got a great rating. Well, that's because his wife, his 2 kids, and his mom and dad gave him a fantastic, fantastic response. Where here, this is 139 people responded. So I couldn't decide which is more meaningful, which is the right way to show this. And man, if there's one thing I learned from the book, working with Jeff and Andy on it is, man, there is no one right way to show this stuff. They kind of beat me up for, well, why don't you just show a box and whisker plot and show the distribution? I don't know why, I just hate that. It just doesn't work for me, but it works great for other people. And if it works for your audience, do that. Or show this other type of distribution as well, which is, hey, I want to show where they were. It's kind of this jittered histogram where I've got the size of the dot is indicating how many responses and how high was the survey respondent. So if anything, 2 years ago, I would have said, oh, the right way to show this is you got to do this. And now it's, I don't know. There may be 2 or 3 really good ways. One way may resonate better with your audience, and that's why I showed you all the different ways of doing sentiment. The survey response thing, I'm going to take 1 minute on it, which is how do you deal with people don't, because this one, there is a full blog that tells you exactly how to do it right down to the recipe. But the idea behind it is what happens if we get, I have a threshold here, which is if the N gets below 20, don't answer, don't show a response. So I'll filter out this, I'll filter out the traditionalists. You can see my N is at 53. Oh, my N is at 10, and I now get this lovely little warning message that says, wait a second, you've applied too many filters. The chart completely disappears. You can't see the chart, and a message. There are 2 charts, both with a filter on them. And the filter says, are there enough responses? And if there are enough responses, the first chart shows, and the second chart is set to not show. If it gets under the threshold, it reverses. So that's how that's done, and all that stuff is right there. So right there. Let's switch over to the slide presentation. No, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, okay, so how did I set the threshold as a parameter? But let's get into, so Thank you. Boy, they're good. So in this case, what I was dealing with was this notion of I don't want people to filter it down so they can see an individual salary and something might be anonymized. Or some statistician has said, this is really meaningless if it's under 20 responses. But maybe you have something which is more dynamic. So I just had a parameter in there for 20. I could have set it for 15 or for 30 or something like that. A more important thing that I want to work on, and you can, if anyone wants in on this, let me know. One is, how much confidence is there based on so few responses? So 32% of people said that they are either very satisfied or satisfied. Well, do you have, what's your confidence level on that, and what's the plus or minus on that? And there are cool ways to show that. That's Ben Jones' book handles it extremely well, and has a way to show it. What it doesn't show is if you're not dealing with percentage. Let's say it's the average Likert score or NPS. How do you show that? Weighted index, like, gee, you ask people how important things are, and gee, now you want to gauge their satisfaction. You want to weigh the satisfaction of the things that are more important more heavily. How do you do that? How many of you are using SPSS to get weights in your data, to do weighted data? Okay, a handful. I'm steadfastly convinced that we can figure out how to skip that step. I just haven't figured it out yet. Intra-question analysis, meaning, hey, instead of filtering by this item or that item or by gender or location, I want to filter this question by that question. And I have some stuff on my blog about it, but I've gotten way better ways of doing it that I hope to present. And also, well, what's on your mind and what would you like to see? And we can possibly work on this together. Where to find all this stuff again. So everything that I've covered today and some of this new stuff will all be at datarevelations.com, and you can just click Visualizing Survey Data. So give me a little bit of time to get this stuff up there. Don't email me at the end of this week, but by the middle of next week, if there's something that you need and it's not up there, let me know. I'm going to take, let's see, where are we with time? I'm going to take 3 minutes of questions. We got some floaters around here, and then I have to put, I have the all-important, big finish. There's no big finish. It's just like, please fill out the survey responses and stuff like that. So, are there questions? We've got some people, you know what? I don't know if they can make it over here with the microphones. Wow, she's fast. There you go.
Have you done anything regarding free response data with Tableau?
Oh, so you mean that you've got free text responses, you're using some text mining thing to figure out what the sentiment is, and that's getting to be pretty popular. So the big deal is, what is the tool that you're using to figure out, do the people love it or hate it based on the words that they're using and surrounding it? So I rely on that has to have happened, and then they feed it in and we do the sentiment analysis. I'm really skeptical of a variety of tools because there's a huge amount of natural language processing that needs to happen to understand, to disambiguate certain terms. But that is definitely on the radar. So cool question. Did you have a question as well right behind you? You can just pass the mic.
So if you're not writing the survey yourself, is there anything you can do to influence the survey writer so that it makes it easier for data analysis, or what to focus on? Like if you had one or two things.
Wow, the issue is, what can you do to stop the person who says, that really could get by with the 15-question survey, but they want to ask the 75-question survey because they want to know every little nuance and stuff like that? I've given up. It's like, look, I don't get into debates about whether you should be using a 5-point scale, a 6-point scale. I won't get in debates about using Net Promoter Score or anything like that. It's like, I will just help you learn how to visualize your survey data. Because really, I'm only 33. The gray hairs have come from fighting that stuff. So
Thank you.
Okay, one or two more questions, and then I do not want to overstay my welcome.
Do Do you deal with significance testing?
So significance testing is what I was getting with the confidence bands.
Okay.
So I do have something that's up on the website, which is the only stuff that I've done is the percentage change between one period and the next period. So hold on. I'm not going to build this from scratch, but I think you let me know, is this what you're talking about? Come on, website, don't fail me now. No. Went to the home page. Come on. So this is showing the difference between this period and the previous period, and the red dot indicates, okay, the increase or decrease is statistically significant given whatever z-test formula the statistician that you trust, it may be you, has given. And there you go, I have a little explanation for how it works and how it was put together. This thing looks really scary, the thing with the square root symbol and the italicized stuff. It is not that difficult, and it's just a matter of table calculations. What I'm more interested in getting in is the survey as a whole. How much confidence do you have in it, and how do you show that? Because just showing plus or minus 3.5%, maybe if you show just how much that is, and especially on responses when you have a really thin demographics, it may be for this demographics the plus or minus is 2%. For this demographic, it's plus or minus 15%. And is that what you're talking about being able to show? It's coming. Last question over there, because wait, no. This is. Oh no, I changed my mind. The last question is actually way. No. Go back over there. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this content. For those of us who work with executives and VPs, and they say, "Oh, I want to see it this way." "Oh no, just kidding. I want to see it that way." What are some of your parting wisdom in what resonates with that audience and in a way how to manage their expectations?
Well, here's going back to this. The executive wants to see how he's doing his or her. He or she is doing his or her department. The more than anything you do, all these different things. If you can give here's how we're doing, you're doing, whatever the group is, versus a peer group, they will love the stuff. They will use it. They will constantly be looking. They're going to say, well, last quarter I was over here. How am I doing this quarter? That stuff really resonates. The other stuff, you can set this stuff up so that you can make it really easy. I showed you a trick, which is, hey, I can now break this question down by every possible facet, every possible demographic. I'll find the 2 or 3 that are meaningful and present that. I can't keep going. We can continue the discussion here. Whomever is present. Oh, I don't think anyone. Is someone presenting next, or is it developers on stage? Is next. Developer on stage. Okay, then we can continue the discussion up here. I'm going to go back to the slide presentation, and you're going to see. Oh, the big finish is. Please, how can you not take a survey after a session about survey data? Well, I can think of one way. If it's going to be a 3 or a 4, you can skip the thing. By the way, that's the other thing that came out from last year. It's like everyone did well. The scale. I couldn't put the scale down to 0. Because it was like you got all these dots bunched up between 3.8 and 4.8. It didn't make it meaningful. So there's the hashtag. We can continue the discussion here. Thank you for this group that has made this extremely easy to present in here, despite having difficulty making eye contact because of the bright lights. And we can continue the discussion here. So, and thank you.